Hey guys, today I'm doing episode 2 of ASMR. This is Sleeping with Burn. And if you guys know that this is an experimental video, it's supposed to be relaxing, help put you guys to sleep. This video really has nothing to do with our topic today, but last time I did my China trip, and today I'm going to do old video games that I played when I was very young. So this should be something new and exciting for a lot of you guys, and I just love to tell stories about my past. So today, I'm going to talk a little bit about old games that I used to play. When I was very little, like 4 or 5 years old, there were these games that I played on Windows 95 called Living Books. And it was kind of cool because the game would work like a book, but there'd be a CD that you inserted into your computer. And when you did that, it would pop up and there would be different pages that you'd go through, and you could click on pictures and icons and other things like that, and they would display something for you. They would create like an animation. It was cool. And there were different living books like Harry and the Haunted House and Tortoise and the Hare. There was Curious George, and there were many, many others. The living books were a whole lot of fun. They worked very well on my old Windows 95. A little bit later in the next decade, I got a new computer with Windows XP. Living Books would no longer play on Windows XP, which broke my heart at the time because I miss good old Living Books. But at the same time, I found many new great video games for Windows XP. Back to when I was very young, like using Windows 95, one of the very first games that I ever played was the first Tomb Raider game. It came out in 1996 when I was 5 years old. At that time, I was really too young to play Tomb Raider, and I was definitely too young to understand it. But my dad was a big Tomb Raider fan way back in the day, and he introduced me to it. At the time, the first Tomb Raider game was huge, and there had never been a game like that before. It was in full 3D. And Laura was created very well. It was platforming. She had the ability to pull out her guns, to grab ledges, to kill enemies, and all that stuff. And there was a full 3-dimensional gaming grid. So at the time, we thought it was just amazing. And there were 15 levels that the game came with, all the way from caves, all the way up through the Great Pyramid. So yeah, the game was really, really cool. However, there was a lot of puzzle solving to it, and although now I still play that game and I stream it live on Twitch, which is a lot of fun, and I recently completed it on No Loads, No Meds, All Secrets. But at the time, we had no Google, no YouTube, and no Stella's Guide. So back then, if you got stuck somewhere, you had to figure it out yourself. Because the first Tomb Raider game came out 2 years before Google, and even when Google came out, it was very, very small compared to what it is today. So yeah, it's different. Back then, when we would buy video games at the gaming store, there would be paperback guidebooks that you would spend 15 or 20 US dollars on. And the gaming store could make a great deal of money off the paperbacks because we needed the paperbacks back then because we had no internet to look up the answers. And it was very, very hard to play these games without getting stuck somewhere. So yeah. The Tomb Raider game that I became the most attached to was Tomb Raider 2. And I don't know why, but maybe I just liked the idea of it being set in China and Tibet, and it just had some really cool levels. The graphics on Tomb Raider 2 were a bit better than Tomb Raider 1, I thought. But yeah, I remember back in the day it would take me 3 or 4 hours to do a certain level on Tomb Raider, and I just figured it out myself, even as a wee one. I was only 6 years old playing good old Tomb Raider 2, and all that stuff. So yeah, I remember Barking Monastery in Tomb Raider 2 was a level I grew particularly fond of. They had those cool monks. You're not supposed to shoot the monks because the monks are your allies, but at the time I didn't know it. And I was reading in the paperback that I'm not supposed to shoot the monks, but the monks would always come after me with the spears because I had shot them before in combat. And I was like, what do you mean I'm not supposed to shoot the monks because they're coming after me trying to kill me? But yeah, if you don't attack the monks in Barkang Monastery, they won't attack you, and they can be really great allies against Bartoli's cultists. So yeah, I know that now. And I also grew attached to Temple of Xi'an. That was a really, really cool level, especially at the time. Also a very long level. It had so many tricks and traps and obstacles and all that stuff. And I went through many different puzzles. The next level was Floating Islands, which was a really scary level. You could fall an infinite fall to your death. Bottomless pits, all that stuff. Yeah, really scared me as a kid. And some of the underwater levels in Tomb Raider 2 used to really scare me because I was terrified of sharks. I was terrified of the idea of ever being bitten or eaten by a shark. And I just couldn't stand the idea of a shark picking off Laura. It was just traumatizing. I couldn't bear with it. So yeah, but Tomb Raider was a game that I grew particularly fond of, and it's been a lifelong interest of mine. Here I am, I'm almost 30 years old, and I am still very fond of Tomb Raider. But anyhow, on to other games. Another game I was really fond of as a kid was Frogger. And I remember I played all the levels on the Frogger game that came out in 1997. I believe it was Frogger He's Back. And they made a big deal about that game because it was Frogger with a full 3D gaming grid. So they had like the standard levels where you would cross the street and the river and all that stuff. Don't get Frogger run over by a car and don't have him drown in the river. But they came out with all these different worlds, like the lily pad zone. There was the leaf zone, the cave zone, the cloud zone, the cacti zone, desert zone, all that stuff. And there was a tropical level at the end. So there were so many different worlds, which was really fascinating, but yet it confused a lot of people at the time. People thought that those levels on Frogger were like really, really difficult. Of course, when you start understanding them, they're not that difficult, and they're actually really, really fun. They took the game to a whole new level. I remember there was a timer. There were 5 baby frogs that you had to go out and rescue. And you had X amount of time, like 30 seconds, 60 seconds, or whatever, to get the baby frog. And if your timer ran out, you'd lose a life. I think you had like 5 lives or something, and after that it was game over. But yeah, fun one. I remember back then, a lot of my classmates were playing on the old PlayStation. So I thought it was strange that I was playing on a computer, but my classmates were playing on a PlayStation. I remember at the time the graphics on the PC I thought was way better than the graphics on the PlayStation, so I was happy to be doing it on the computer. But I had some friends come over to my house and they're like, why don't you play on the PlayStation? It's better. And I didn't agree with that, but I can see why, because some people think it's so much more relaxing to be holding a controller versus playing with a keyboard and a mouse. Anyhow, I remember the next generation, which was the 6th generation. We got Windows XP for newer games. Windows XP could not run a lot of my Windows 95 games, which broke my heart at the time, but we found many new games. It was around 2003, 2002-ish that my dad bought a console called the Xbox. It was the old original Xbox, and I grew such an attachment to the computer that I didn't want to play anything on the Xbox. But my dad showed me some games like Dragon's Lair 3D, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and he also showed me some oh yeah, and there was that new Frogger game, Frogger Beyond, which was for the original Xbox. So yeah, I grew to really, really love the Xbox. And Buffy the Vampire Slayer, that's an Xbox exclusive game. That game was one of the best games of all time. I'm not kidding. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, yeah, she was pretty freaking hot. And yeah, I loved it. She'd go out and kill vampires, and all the levels in that game were really, really well done. I would totally recommend the game Buffy the Vampire Slayer for you. The game is kick ass. Dragon's Lair 3D, that was a cool one too. Um, it had the same, it had sort of like the same levels as the old game in the arcade, but yet you'd play it in full 3D, and they just really, really brought the level to life. It was outstanding. I loved like the gaming grid of Dragon's Lair 3D. They would show the same animations as the old game in the arcade, but yet it would involve you getting so much more freedom. So much more. So yeah, Dragon's Lair 3D is a game I would totally recommend for you guys. I miss a lot of old games. Like, you guys probably know, I'm quite the retro gamer. I like a lot of 90s games. I miss my old original Xbox. Later on, we got an Xbox 360 where I played some newer games like Prince of Persia, Forgotten Sands. Assassin's Creed is a new franchise I got into once I got that Xbox 360. And Assassin's Creed became just about my favorite franchise of all time. So Assassin's Creed, I would totally recommend any of the Assassin's Creed games for you, especially the Ezio trilogy. If you get Assassin's Creed 2, go ahead and start with that one, and then you can do Assassin's Creed Brotherhood and Assassin's Creed Revelations. In Assassin's Creed 2, you get to play this Italian man called Ezio, and he starts off like 17 years old with his family, and you get to see him grow so much as a person. There's so much character development. You see him being this childish playboy, and then he grows up into like a 35, 40-year-old man where he's mature and he's like a leader. He understands what it's like to be an assassin, and he leads people. Ezio has a great personality, great charisma, and he's very selfless, very caring. You cannot not like Ezio. In Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, Ezio's like 40 years old. He's in his 40s, and yeah, he's so much more mature, and he's a really handsome looking guy. I'm not gay or anything like that, but yeah, I do find Ezio to be good looking. And Assassin's Creed Revelations was the final one where Ezio's old and he's got a gray beard. And yeah, he's even more of an assassin leader. But yeah, he talks about how things used to be so easy, like when you were younger. But yeah, the Assassin's Creed games took place in different areas. I think Assassin's Creed 2 took place around Venice and Florence. Assassin's Creed Brotherhood was in Rome, and then in Assassin's Creed Revelations, Ezio set out to Constantinople. So that was a lot of fun. And especially Assassin's Creed Revelations, I cannot tell you how breathtaking 16th century Constantinople was. It's beautiful every turn you go around the streets. You look inside the buildings, you look at the art, the antiquities, all that. I could not believe my eyes for what I was seeing. But yeah. I know that when I do this, I say a lot of ums and uhs, which is not the best, but it's what I do. I try to think about things. After the Ezio trilogy, there was Assassin's Creed 3, which took place in early America. And I didn't like it as much because early America was not as interesting to me as like Europe, say Italy, or the French Revolution. So yeah, Assassin's Creed 3 I thought was more boring, but there are some people that, you know, really like Assassin's Creed 3. Assassin's Creed 3 started in England. You control Haytham. You set out to Boston. and basically you get to settle there. Haytham is our main character that we grow an attachment to, and then later on you find out that he's a Templar. So it's ironic that you're Haytham and then you're working with these other guys like Charles Lee and Thomas Hickey. You get to know them, you develop a bond with them a little bit, and then you find out that they're douchebags. And then after that, you start controlling Haytham's son because Haytham had a relationship with an Indian woman. And they had a son named Connor who is like, half Indian, I guess you could say. And he's pretty much your main character. He's the real assassin. And then his father, who you controlled before, is basically the antagonist. It really bothered me at the time because I just didn't like a boy fighting against his old man. It just didn't seem right, and it didn't seem right at all to have an assassin leader, Achilles, like telling us that we have to kill our father. It's just wrong. But so yeah, I didn't like Assassin's Creed 3 that much, but it was still a fun game. Assassin's Creed Black Flag was an awesome game. I loved Black Flag. Assassin's Creed Black Flag, you control Haytham's father, Edward, and he sets out to the Caribbean. You control a ship called the Jackdaw, and there's like a huge world map where you can go anywhere from the Bahamas to Mexico and all these different islands like Cuba, all that stuff. It's a very similar setting to Pirates of the Caribbean, if you've seen those. Black Flag had so many things you could do. They had harpooning missions, they had diving bells, they had legendary ships, which, believe me, they were a lot of work to bring down. Only the greatest of captains could ever defeat one of them. They had several other challenges, like you had got to liberate forts, you got to onboard ships, try to take their cargo, their loot, all that stuff. They had treasure chests that you go out and find, treasure maps where you find hidden chests. They also had hunting, where you would hunt certain animals. And of course, they had the main story mode. About 70 to 75% of that game is out at sea on your ship, which I actually thought made for a really great game. I really liked sailing out at sea. But still, it was nice to do things on land too. We were working with Blackbeard on that game, and Blackbeard, despite him being a terrible guy, I became really emotionally invested in Blackbeard. So Blackbeard was getting ready to retire, and he was attempting to board the Man of War. But when he boarded the Man of War, his enemy soldiers, they overpowered him and they beheaded him. So yeah, we got to see Blackbeard meet his demise, and that was just one of the saddest deaths I've ever seen in my life. I couldn't believe it. But, I could see something like that coming. But, yeah, you might be less sad if you think about how terrible he was, but still, I was sad about it at the time. And, yeah, anyhow, Black Flag was overall a really great game. The next game, Unity, was in France. I really enjoyed Unity. The character Arno was a little bit more of a pansy. He was kind of like a lover boy, so he couldn't fight quite as well, but yeah, I realized that they wanted you to strategize and rely on stealth a lot more in Assassin's Creed Unity than what you had in the previous games. But yeah, the graphics in Unity, the interiors of France, they were incredible. The interiors that you would see, amazing, especially like the sculptures, the antiquities, the walls, everything. I could not believe it. And the aesthetics in that game were some of the best I had ever seen. I think that Assassin's Creed Unity, believe it or not, may have had better interiors than The Witcher or even Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I really liked Unity a lot. well, it had beautiful graphics, but I didn't like Unity as much as I liked Black Flag. I wasn't as crazy about our character, but it was still fun. And after that was Syndicate. Syndicate I didn't like Syndicate all that much. I thought it was kind of boring. Just took place in London. It just wasn't my ideal. And after Syndicate, we had Assassin's Creed Origins, which took place in ancient Egypt. And yeah, the graphics in Origins were beautiful, but I could tell that Origins was very different from its predecessor or pretty much any of the previous games. It seemed they used a whole different engine for Origins. Eagle Vision was totally different, and many elements of Origins, like the more advanced AIs, the side quests, the inventory, the level upgrades, the map, the menu formatting, the armor, and especially the visuals reminded me so much of Witcher 3. They had so many elements of Witcher 3. And I don't know if the idea was that Witcher 3 did so well and was so popular that Assassin's Creed maybe wanted to adapt those elements into their game to make Assassin's Creed be better. Because after Witcher came out, Assassin's Creed was, well, it had dropped a little bit. It couldn't compete with Witcher. But, you know, I've always liked Assassin's Creed. Origins had a much bigger map. Assassin's Creed Odyssey was pretty much the same way, taking place in Greece, and it had a huge world map, far bigger than Origins or anything else. And Assassin's Creed Odyssey, AC Odyssey, had, I believe, the same engine as Origins. It also looked a lot like Witcher from the visuals, except for it took place in Greece and not, you know, the Nordic countries or wherever Witcher's supposed to take place. Witcher is fictional, so none of the places are real, but it's got a very Nordic-like setting. Assassin's Creed Valhalla is the latest game that I've been playing lately. I've been streaming it on Twitch. Assassin's Creed Valhalla looks a whole lot like Witcher, even more so than Assassin's Creed Origins or Odyssey. Especially with it taking place in Norway and then in England, it's very Witcher-like. So yeah, I'm having a lot of fun with Valhalla. I encourage you guys to get it too. And Valhalla has a whole lot of different side quests, raids, and viewpoints, all that stuff. Leaps of faith. The leap of faith is something that Assassin's Creed has had ever since the very beginning. So, yeah, the leap of faith is something Assassin's Creed had. It's original. So yeah, I think Assassin's Creed is one of the best franchises of all times. Tomb Raider is another one I really like. And yeah, I also grew an attachment to Prince of Persia. I don't know if I want to talk as much about that one tonight, but I certainly could. I think that maybe I've talked long enough tonight, but I'll gladly do another one of these tomorrow or a couple days from now, and I really thank you guys for listening. Please subscribe, leave a comment below, and stay tuned till next time. Thank you so much, and I hope you guys are asleep by now, and if not, then you have a wonderful night. Thank you.